Okay, hi everybody. Week 11 and privacy and Article 8, which is the right to privacy and breach of confidence. And we're going to look at those issues. Very controversial, this area, the area of privacy and people demanding quite rightly that they should have some, and the other side of the argument being quite rightly that we as journalists have a right to freedom of expression, which is enshrined in law, the same way as Article 8 is enshrined in the European Convention. So here we go. Famous case from a few years ago, if you recall, Cliff Richard's house was raided by South Yorkshire Police, and the BBC went along with it, or were invited along with it, to take pictures and video footage. The first he knew of it was he was on holiday and he saw it on television, so it would be quite a shock. And whatever you think of Cliff Richard, he has a right to a private life, and that was breached. It was alleged, or it was proved, in that particular instance, he got substantial damages from the BBC. Good example. The ultimate sanction against people invading privacy was the Leveson inquiry, or some of the details of the Leveson inquiry as it was taking place, found to be some pretty horrendous breaches of people's right to privacy and right to a personal life, really. Invasion of privacy was a key issue. Data protection breaches, as in people, journalists or private detectives, hacking people's phones and computers. Harassment, consistent pursuit of people for tittle tattle pictures, etc. Doorstepping people. Phone hacking, getting information from phones, reading and listening to phone messages. Computer hacking, likewise. Subterfuge, as in pretending to be someone you aren't to get a story, to get somebody to talk to you. Paying police for stories and paying police for access to stories. Again, paying politicians and other officials for stories. And the paparazzi pictures of harassing and pursuing people for pictures while they're in the street, so-called, or on so-called private property. So, a staunch defence of this by Paul McMullen, former News of the World reporter, who gave testimony at the Leveson inquiry, who believes privacy is for pedos, as in, whenever people are left to their private life, they get up to no good. Debatable there. Obviously, people do try and hide things when they've not been doing the right thing, but also people have a right to privacy anyway. In 21 years of invading people's privacy, I've never actually come across anyone who's been doing any good. Very cynical view of life. He's probably looking for stories all the time, so that's the kind of mindset he's got into. The only people I think need privacy are people who do bad things, he says. Privacy is the space bad people need to do bad things in. Privacy is particularly good for paedophiles, and if you keep that in mind, privacy is for pedos. Fundamentally, no one else needs it. Privacy is evil. It brings out the worst qualities in people, brings out hypocrisy, allows them to do bad things. A hardline defence of his right to delve into other people's lives. He didn't get very far with it. So, breach of privacy. Before the year 2000, I believe it was, or 1990. Was it 2000? Well, we'll come to it later. There was no law of privacy. In 1990, an actor called Gordon Kay suffered brain damage in a car accident. Two journalists, while he was in hospital, visited him from the Sunday Sport. I think they wore doctor's coats and clipboards and went into his room, got pictures of him, couldn't talk, he was unconscious. They used the picture in the paper. He was a big star at the time, and the Sport visited him. It was found in breach of Editors Code Clause 8, which is a right to privacy. They should have got journalists should have identified themselves and got permission from the authorities before entering, which they didn't. The papers carried a picture in the interview, or they didn't say anything. The Kay family was told he had no remedy in law because at that time there was no right of privacy. So it was 2000. The origins of the privacy law. Before 2000, no privacy law in the UK, but a number of existing UK laws did give some limited protection, including breach of confidence, where if you tell somebody something in good faith, they had no right to sell your information on or pass it on. Data protection, that your data is protected by law, not for other people to see. Trespass, as in a physical trespass of somebody on your property or near or on your property. Harassment, chased down the street. We're going to look at Sienna Miller in a bit, who was repeatedly chased down the street by paparazzi. Defended by libel, which we looked at last week. People have a right to not have bad things said about them. There is a debate on which is the stronger law there, the right to freedom of expression or the right not to be libelled. And again, we're going to see today that they're two opposite sides of the coin in terms of the law, and the debate is where the two meet. Also, the law of copyright helps to some extent for people's information to be kept to themselves. A lot of these slides are self-explanatory, and I'm going to read them because I need to, but you can go through them yourself and pick up just as much information really as I'm giving you. I'll be adding stuff here and there, but if you read them yourself, you're going to get the gist of what this is all about. That's the idea of the slides, so you can go to them and get most of the, or practically all the information you need. Breach of confidence law dates back to the 19th century, and it's based on the principle that a person who has acquired information in confidence should not take unfair advantage of it. So it speaks for itself really. Originally applied to parties in a contractual relationship. Now it extends to cases where there is no contract, i.e. kiss and tell, usually dealt with by a court injunction. Breach of confidence was an important factor in Naomi Campbell's test case against the Mirror Group, which we'll look at in detail as we go through, where details of her drug use and subsequent treatment for addiction were written about by the Mirror, and they were found to be in breach of privacy. Human Rights Act 1998 introduced Article 8, the right to a private life. 2004, House of Lords decision on Naomi Campbell case against the Daily Mirror. Judges ruled that even public figures are entitled to a private life, including Naomi Campbell, even though she was espousing that in public that drugs are bad and speaking out against the use. She was actually using them herself and was getting treatment for addiction. The Mirror broke the story and they got themselves in a bit of trouble over it, a lot of trouble over it. And this was a test case in which Judge Sir Charles Gray said that the judgment from that case actually created a law of privacy for the first time in the UK. In this case, Article 8, which is a right to privacy, was seen to overrule Article 10, which is freedom of expression in the view of the judges. Important turning point there. This is the European Commission of Human Rights Article 8, which outlines the right to respect for private and family life. Everyone has a right to respect for his or her private and family life, his home or his or her home, and his or her correspondence. There shall be no interference by public authority with the exercise of this right, except in such as in accordance with the law and is necessary in democratic society. You can read the rest yourself. It doesn't seem much point in me doing it. It's quite obvious where we're going with this. I'll leave that one with you. The Editor's Code, Clause 2. Sorry about that. Editor's Code, Clause 2 says that everyone is entitled to respect for his or her private and family life, home, health and correspondence, including digital communications. Editors will be expected to justify these intrusions without consent. It is unacceptable to photograph individuals in private places without their consent, and this is important. Private places are private or public property where there is a reasonable expectation of privacy. Hospitals, rehab clinics, places of worship, etc. Hospitals there, Gordon Kay, we spoke about earlier. Clause 2 mirrors the Act, Article 8 of the Human Rights Act, but is subject to exception of the public interest, which is very important for a journalist. We are obliged to take notice of the Article 8 of the Human Rights Act, but we do have a public interest defence in breaking it. which is important for us. Freedom Article 10 is a freedom of expression which often clashes with the right for people's private life. We're free to hold opinions and receive and impart information and ideas without interference by public authority. There is a partly what we do this for is the right of freedom of expression itself is a good thing, but also that we are an important part of a democratic society in which we are allowed to express ourselves as in part of the challenge to government. The exercise of these freedoms, since it carries duties and responsibilities, may be subject to such formalities, conditions, restrictions or penalties as are prescribed by law and necessary in a democratic society. Okay. The public interest and privacy. Agents Code say there can be an exemption on the grounds of public interest for detecting or exposing crime or a serious impropriety, protecting public health and safety, excuse me, preventing the public from being misled by an action or statement of an individual or organisation. So basically, if you're exposing crime, you can break the privacy law. If you are protecting public health and safety, for example, a combination of both those two, and the third one, the expenses scandal, where public servants were fiddling their expenses, the rules were corrupt and they were bending the rules anyway to get more money out of it. Huge scene, MPs went to prison, some resigned and were sacked. Big deal, great triumph for journalism in my view, and most people's view. We were allowed to do it because receiving a stolen disc with information about MP's expenses on it was considered in the public interest to do so, and any other rules were overridden because of the public interest. Public interest and freedom of expression itself, as already said. IPSO will consider the extent to which material is already in the public domain, also an issue, and involving children under 16 editors must demonstrate an exceptional public interest. So it's even tougher restrictions there. This Naomi Campbell, supermodel Naomi Campbell, sued the Mirror in 2002 for breach of confidence. The story claimed Campbell was receiving treatment for drug addiction while making a public stand against drugs in modelling, which was both of those were true. At the High Court, judges held that details of her drug addiction and treatment could be published in the public interest. But they found that details of her treatment and photos of her leaving Narcotics Anonymous were a breach of her privacy. They fudged it a little bit there. Images of her emerging from a Narcotics Anonymous session seemed confidential, or were deemed confidential, even though they were taken in the public street. Controversial. Campbell received £3,500 in damages, but the costs to the Mirror were £500,000. So she got a bit out of it, and the Exchequer got a lot, and the lawyers got a lot. Privacy test case. Michael Douglas and Catherine Zeta-Jones, their image rights sold their wedding photos they sold to OK Magazine. Others used them and they sued. Princess Stephanie of Monaco used Article 8 to ban intrusive pictures. J.K. Rowling likewise for private pictures. Prince Charles had a dispute with the Mail over his travel journals. Focusing on Lorena McKennitt, the Ash Kish and Tell case, and Max Mosley in the News of the World about his so-called orgies and sex tapes, etc. These were considered test cases. Likewise, Sienna Miller, I think it was Sienna Miller who said, in any other area of life, if a dozen men are chasing a young woman down the street, down a side street, 11 o'clock at night, it would be seen as a crime in itself. When the people have got cameras in their hands, it's seen as okay. Fair point. She got £53,000 for press intrusion into her life, paparazzi particularly, as an invasion of her privacy. There are lots of other test cases that have helped to establish the law, Article 8 in UK law, huge implications for all media. Max Mosley wants media to give advance warning of publication to allow time to seek a court injunction. And there have been some of those: John Terry, Rio Ferdinand, Wayne Rooney, Ryan Giggs, all footballers. Form of gagging order, an order from a judge stopping reporters from talking or writing about a case that has not yet been decided, in which the press is not even allowed to report on the existence and details of an injunction. So you can't even tell people that you're banned from what you're banned from doing. Celebrities are now using privacy and Article 8 to block publication rather than suing for libel. Damages are now replaced by a huge cost of fighting the case in court. Another example there, that was the, I believe, the Elton John case, which was available to people in America, but not here. And the information was not made available online to people in this country. Of course, everyone soon found out, and that was out in the open anyway. Harassment, Clause 3. Journalists will not engage in intimidation, harassment, or persistent pursuit. They must not persist in questioning, telephoning, pursuing, or photographing individuals once asked to desist. It's important to remember that. Shouldn't remain on property when asked to leave, and must not follow them. If requested, they must identify themselves and who they represent. Editors must ensure these principles are observed by those working for them and take care not to use non-complaint material from other sources. People generally know when they're harassing someone. People generally know when they're doing the wrong thing. The difficulty is when you've been doing this, or when you've been doing a paparazzi job or a news reporter's job, your professional pride can override what used to be your normal response. So you do knock on the door, you do take one too many pictures, you do harass for another question. It can happen. Your professional circumstances sometimes override your conscience, and you need to bear that in mind when you're in that position. Intrusion into shock and grief. In cases involving personal grief and shock, inquiries and approaches must be made with sympathy and discretion. Publication handled sensitively. Doesn't restrict the right to report legal proceedings like inquests, but as we've said before, when reporting suicide, care should be taken to avoid excessive detail about the method used. Difficult area, one where you need to be sensitive and take care. You have a right to report, but you also have a responsibility to report with sensitivity for people's feelings. Sometimes the two clash. Sometimes you make a decision one time that you wouldn't make another. It's something, but you must bear in mind the rules and the conscience that you create through those rules. Okay, here's some more reading for you on confidentiality, privacy and copyright. I'll be putting up some questions as with the other screencasts. There'll be 10 questions which will help you to address your quiz test at the end of the semester, details of which will become clear later. But it's something you need to know. You know this stuff. At least remember, be able to answer the 10 questions correctly. Okay, thank you. Goodbye.